So the next speaker we have with us is Salema from United Kingdoms, and she will be talking on multidisciplinary fields for resilient contemporary leadership through innovation. So let me give you a little brief on Salema. Salema Valiu is an internationally recognized expert and consultant on the impact of technology on mental health, wellness, and society. She is passionate about the benefits of combining multidisciplinary fields to create more holistic frameworks for leadership and policy change in the fields of emerging technology. She is an IEEE and University of Cambridge Technology and Wellbeing guest speaker and is currently writing her first book. May we call upon Salema. Salema, can we have you on the stage, please?
Hi there, everybody.
Hi, Salema. Good to see you.
Nice to see you. I don't know how I can quite follow your your talk and your presentation. That's a hard act to follow.
Thank you, Salema. Thank you so much.
So I will share my screen with you.
Sure.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. Fabulous. Okay, well, thank you very much for that amazing introduction. Now I've got to live up to it, I guess. So the picture on the right side, I'm hoping that you can see it because it's very relevant to this topic that just building on basically what people may have spoken about yesterday. I was working yesterday, so I didn't get a chance to see the conference, but I just came in on the last speaker but one. Very interesting in regards to rockets and brain interactions and frameworks. So very much in line with my work, which is around people, technology, culture, and society. And this picture was taken a couple of years ago from an exhibition at the Barbican, which was looking at AI and humanity and the direction that we're going in with this emerging technology. And the first paragraph on that particular picture really resonates and is very relevant to what we may have noticed more recently with the pandemic, is that technology and AI have become more prevalent than they were before the pandemic. So we're going to look at how the pandemic has obviously exuberated what has started before with emerging technology and how that impacts leaders, businesses, and mental health and well-being for society. So the four signposts that I'm going to run through in this presentation is really just looking, like I said, at how the disruption to what was classified maybe as a normal life before, how technology has changed the way that we view life, the way that we interact in our everyday lives, and the general impact of that on society. And, you know, why is this fourth industrial revolution different to the revolutions that have gone before? Because evolution obviously is a natural reoccurring process, but what are the reasons why this may prove more challenging for humanity than before? And so when we look at that, we're obviously looking at what types of approaches could be more beneficial in leading others and helping us navigate this new landscape, whether that's professionally or personally or both. And what are the real risks to humanity and society through innovation? So when I'm talking about innovation here, I'm talking specifically about emerging technologies as well. So we've seen an increased dependency, obviously, on technology due to the pandemic. It affects how we've communicated and interacted, but one of the negatives of that is that we may want to look at how that's impacted people's social intelligence and the skills in how we interact human to human. So recently I've been talking to a lot of my clients that have social anxiety about society reopening again, and that's giving them a real anxiety. It's almost like they can't remember what life was before the pandemic. because it's integrated into everything we do, AI and digital technologies. And obviously, we've seen more and more people working from home that have still, that still have their jobs. People are working longer hours than before. It's an interesting balance, because a lot of people reported that they've had a better work-life balance because they've got to see their family more and they've got to appreciate the outside world more. Other people have said that they are expected to work longer hours and that they're constantly using technology as they move through their days. And as a result of this, I gave a presentation to the Bank of America just before Christmas. We were looking at the increasing levels of technological disorders and predominantly techno stress. So if we look at that, if you're working from home, you're on Zoom meetings all day, and then, to wind down in the evening because everything had been shut down, you may be streaming, watching rather than going out. So this technology really has embedded itself. And in order to find that balance, one has to have a good sense of values and perspective. So the other aspect here is that the technology and the pandemic have influenced and changed human values, and along with that, feelings of self-worth. So what was interesting here, this was partly in a presentation I gave before some time ago, but it's interesting, this study that was done by Baylor University, this was like a few years ago, and already we can see some of the bullet points that this research did. Okay, it's a relatively small pool, but it's still 1,500 people. So already then, back in 2017, with this research really uncovered how some people were feeling their underlying fears of the change in society and in regards to work and infrastructure and systems. So this saying, or this description, is referred to as technophobes. So this obviously affects unemployment, employment, reskilling, which is like a huge global concern right now, especially as we come out of the pandemic. So you can start to see on these bullet points how it was already beginning to integrate itself into society before the pandemic. So some people, and it doesn't matter whether they're old or young, some people, this survey also revealed, this research also revealed that they were afraid because they didn't understand the technology. Pre-COVID, technology was still emerging, but at a steady process. Now, since the pandemic, the speed, and that comes into why the fourth industrial revolution is very different, is at an exponential growth rate. So now everything is constantly changing, and a lot of people find it very hard to adapt to the constant changing and upgrades in technology. So the relationship between human and automation has been a concern for quite a while. I was at a conference, I was at a talk that was given by the New Statesman in London a couple of years ago with one of the heads of the World Economic Forum, Kay Firth Butterfield. And we had a very big debate on this. People, in certain occupations, they may fear that they're legitimately losing their jobs, that they might not be able to reskill. Pre-COVID, so this talk that I went to was pre-COVID, it was transformation would be more gradual, but now obviously it's not gradual, it's very, very quick. And we know that by the amount of updates that we see every time we have to update our phones and our computers. It's another update, it's another update, it's another update. So it raises some bigger, complex questions around public policy that have technical as well as social and ethical implications. And we can see how all of those factors then come in to create possible factors for concern around people's well-being, mental health, and a sense of purpose. So what are the lessons so far, and what does that mean moving forward for innovation? Time to rethink and reshape our conditioning with technology. We're at a crucial, pivotal point now. We need to think about how we can protect our mental health, our human interaction and values, to find this balance between the artificial and natural world. So it's a healthy balance, so we can consciously coexist alongside this technology, because it's not going anywhere soon. We're going with the technology. You know, it's also a lot to do about education, to look past the novelty and convenience of this technology and look at what the broader implications for society and future generations, what that means. And it's also provoking us to really show a keener interest in protecting our digital human rights. You know, and along with that comes AI governance and regulations to all make sure that we are innovating responsibly and creating a world that we feel is going to be right for us, rather than it being dictated by something else. So why is the fourth industrial revolution proving more challenging for humanity? So a few bullet points here. I was on a conference call with the executive chairman from the WEF, and this was an address that he gave, and is more or less how I would have described it. But we can just see by the bullet points here, whilst revolutions have always built upon what has gone before, the reason why this era or this revolution is different is because of the speed and the fusion that's blurring between AI, digital transformation, and automation. And this fusion of technologies is then blurring the lines between the physical, the digital, and biological spheres. So it's a very interesting time to be on the planet. Again, this slide, this picture, was actually taken from the exhibition as well. And it shows just a brief snapshot of time from 1994 to 2017, already us in the computer age, and this big drive of data. And you know, a lot now is regarded, data is regarded as the new currency, just as coding will become the new language and coding will change. So the speed of current breakthroughs we haven't seen before, if we compare it to what has gone before, and it's disrupting every industry. It's reshaping everything that we thought we knew, and we're creating new frameworks, new industries, even within industries. And it doesn't matter what country you're in, every country is touched by this technology. And so this really brings in a completely new time to be alive, to live. It's changing everything that we do. So why do we need to be more mindful about this technology when we're leading others? Are we setting, you know, what sort of example do we want to set? And why should we take action now? Oops, sorry. Ooh. So this was an interesting post that was put on LinkedIn the other day by a friend of mine who's a neuroscience and bioengineer. And it's by a gentleman called Alan Winfield. And he wrote a very short article. He works with robotics and AI. And when you've got people working in those fields that start becoming concerned about the directionality of where this technology is going and how it's being used, then it's really time to take notice. So what's interesting for me when I read this article is that it's almost like a role reversal. So if we think about why we created technology, we created it to assist us with moving forward and efficiency, driving efficiency and helping us do the best things that we can in the world today. So it's assisting us. The interesting part of his article is now saying that he views it the other way around. It could be a possible role reversal. Whilst AI is creating a lot of jobs, it's the quality of the jobs that it's creating that could be a cause for concern. So I just took this extract because I thought it was very important, where he talks about human assistance to robots and AIs. You know, are we continually going to assist them in this way, or will eventually the roles be reversed? Will AIs, where AIs and robots were assisting us, will it then be reversed and will be the assistance to the technology? This also brings up a lot of questions around why we need a global skilling revolution. These are some facts. I was on a course with Andrew Nigg of Stanford University, and we were looking at displacement and placement around jobs in AI and technology. And the first two here, the job displacement, that was an estimation that he was giving through his knowledge and his research. So we can start to see the impact of this technology and how the growth exponential is actually creating more need for this reskilling of the workforce. And as a leader, as a contemporary leader, these are all facts and figures that we need to be aware of. And that obviously comes into making sure you've got the right people in the right positions and that you are providing training and redeployment. So those figures I feel are quite staggering. And it's definitely something that all leaders need to be aware of. And that was the talk that I attended, Man versus Machine, AI and the Future of the UK. So what type of approaches then could be beneficial when we look at this new emerging landscape in navigating not only ourselves, but others, especially if you're leading teams? One thing we know with contemporary is that it's mutable. Our landscape that we're now living in, we find ourselves living in, is a mutable one because of the rate of change and upgrade all the time. So contemporary leadership styles need to really encompass that quality, need to be mutable enough to adapt to the changing landscape. And that means, as we come on to the 12 enemies of adaptability, you'll see how that relates into that. There's some key questions, though, obviously, or some key points that one needs to be aware of. That's the difference between the three main structures, between digital transformation, artificial intelligence, and automation. You know, matching these infrastructures with holistic frameworks then can help us safeguard employees, it can help safeguard the companies, as well as cultivating a greater stability around digital resilience. So there's just a few key points there, again, why this might be beneficial to think along these lines. And Kay sums it up perfectly. To be truly diverse, you need to bring people into AI and contemporary leadership that think differently. And we see how that then feeds into the enemies of adaptability. So I'm sure that you have all seen this graph before, but this basically is looking at management structures, inflexible business practices, old school thinking for new world problems is nothing really new, but the 12 enemies of adaptability, I feel personally, is more relevant now in this landscape than it was when it was first talked about years ago, because we can see that some of the structures or some of the companies that were clinging on by doing things the old way before COVID have been broken, and they don't exist anymore because they didn't invest in their infrastructures. They didn't invest fully in their digital online presence. They didn't have infrastructures that were moving with the times. And that's another big thing. When we look at contemporary leadership, we have to move with the times. We're evolving, the world is evolving around us. Therefore, old management styles, rigid structures, old skill sets, lack of diversity, insufficient experimentation, to try different things. These are all part of what we should be looking at when we look at contemporary leadership, not being afraid to actually look at what's been in place, what's coming next, to move with the times. So here I've just put, again, a few bullet points here on what it may look like, to give you an idea. One thing a lot of people agree on in emerging technology is that leadership will be crucial. It will play a bigger role than ever before. So obviously, leadership as well, how that's perceived, is no longer top heavy. It now needs an integration, it needs more participation, it needs involvement and contribution from everyone. And then we come back to this aspect of multidisciplinary fields. Having people from multidisciplinary fields will give you that quality. Leaders also they may employ teams of people to look at future trends and developments, but they also need to have some idea of what's going on themselves and not to be dependent, and if we look at dependency on others, then we're not taking responsibility. Yes, delegate by all means, but obviously be aware. We're looking at being mindful of these changes. And if you're leading others, you need to have a good grasp of what's predicted and future trends. Where appropriate, hopefully all companies are trying to go by the framework of the UN 17 Sustainable Goals. If you don't know what that is, there's plenty online about that. It's applicable to whatever industry that you're in. There's four main core aspects that are relatable to technology. When we're looking at communities, when we're looking at infrastructures, when we're looking at diversity and bias, those are all things that can come into play. But like I say, it's a very broad framework, whether you're in construction or production. The sustainable goals, you won't be able to meet all 17, but there is a possibility that you might decide that you're going to focus on 3 or 4, depending on what your business is. And then again, when we looked at reskilling, this is about preparing redeployment of employees and then looking at what retraining you can possibly provide if their jobs are going to become obsolete because of their technology. So when we're looking at leadership, we're looking at support mechanisms for that leadership as well. So you obviously want to have a good team of people around you, but what is that team going to look like? So really, we want to look at having people that are experienced in AI governance, in digital human rights. So especially if you're embedding a lot of technology into your infrastructures, futurologists, people that are aware of coming trends, all of these aspects can really transform where you go with your business. So we're looking to move from dependence to independence to interdependence. When we look at the 12 enemies of adaptability, we can see how dependence has held us back, depending on old infrastructures pre-COVID that have now been broken. So we now need to establish a new independence and interdependence, that connection of leading with others and working with others. So the dependence obviously is the over-reliance, the vulnerability, the weakness, having too much faith or using one paradigm to build your infrastructure around, whereas independence is all about sovereignty, which is really important at the moment, as well as liberty and freedom. Interdependence, really, if we look at that concept, we could look at the systems theory as well. You know, just as systems learn and adapt, we need to learn and adapt as well. We can see how interdependence and systems theory and multidisciplinary fields really come together. So, you know, we're looking at how we can develop applicable concepts and principles that are not specific to one domain or not specific to one paradigm. So again, using and drawing on multidisciplinary fields, people from various fields as well, you know, can offer different perspectives and possible solutions to solving a problem. So when we look at human interaction, in the human interaction chart, if you go to the fourth paradigm of and the habit, it's classed as think win-win. I'm sure that you've heard of this before. But the bullet points here, again, are more prevalent now than they've ever been if you're in an industry that's dealing with emerging technology. Obviously, most of you know the discussions that are going on around AI and facial recognition and different biases. So, but this is applicable to any business again. You know, how do you do business? Are you ensuring the interests of all parties are considered? You know, this is a big issue around tech companies because it tends to be one-sided until they're caught out, and then they have to do something about it. When we look at principle-centered teams, you know, we're looking at awareness to the implications on a larger scale, to ethical issues of our actions that we're taking as leaders, and also the actions of your team. What is right and in the best interest for all? And then we can see how human rights and digital human rights may come into that. It's no longer focused, well, hopefully, it's no longer focused about trying to get the upper hand or getting the best deal. Hopefully, that's what COVID may have taught us, to mute our approach and make it more transparent, more clear, more fair. With a win-win paradigm, we can start to see how that could possibly build more synergy as well in your teams. You know, the ability for leaders to recognize and take diverse strengths and talents within a group of individuals, or to recruit people to cultivate within that team to produce, hopefully, astounding results. So what are holistic frameworks? What does it mean? Obviously, when we look at holistic, we're looking at overall. We're looking at our physical, we're looking at our emotional, we're looking at our mental, we're looking at our spiritual wellness, our energy, our health, the entire being. But that also extends out to the people that we interact with, our environment, which has changed because of COVID. Because we're doing this. We're not actually in a room or a conference setting together. And whilst this is great because it gives us the accessibility to reach a broader audience, there's still nothing like real human-to-human interaction in a real setting. So even our virtual environments will have an impact on our overall state of wellness. And obviously drawing on multidisciplinary fields, different forms of philosophy, psychology, yoga, mindfulness will give us a greater understanding of our mind, body, and behavior. And ultimately, that's what we want considered when we're leading others. Innovating responsibly, then, what does that look like? There is an interesting research done by UCL back in 2018, and it looked at really understanding the challenges that were starting then within companies and institutions. And it makes some very interesting reading. If you're interested, then just leave me your email and I will email you the report. But they highlighted again, the importance of putting processes into place that encourage adaptive behavior within their workforce, within teams, providing this evolution, reskilling. What's the environment? What's the digital learning environment looking like? What's the holistic framework that's in place to protect employees' mental health as well? So when we look at actively building resilience, we're not just looking at it from a business perspective, we're also looking at that from a business infrastructure, and then we're looking at from an employee's perspective as well. So how could embedding holistic frameworks into infrastructures be beneficial? Or hopefully it will promote more ethical considerations when we look at policies and policy change within the company, but also attached to emerging technology and how you're going to integrate that into your company business. Hopefully it will cultivate a degree of transparency, clarity, and fairness that may have only been simmering under the surface before, and bringing that out into the open. It will safeguard employers as well as employees. We're hopefully going to protect mental health, wellness, and human interaction, and in the process then protect human values. And ultimately, it will help us find balance and perspective between the artificial and natural worlds. So when we look at how we can benefit from this multidisciplinary perspective in contemporary leadership.
Salema, sorry to interrupt. Salema, sorry to interrupt. Would you be concluding? Would you be concluding? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I'm right at the end.
Perfect. It's perfect.
So this is, I'll finish off with this favorite quote. So this is a quote from a great Armenian philosopher and his student. And I think I'm not going to read it. I'll just leave it there for you to see. But I think that's very prevalent to understanding how we see ourselves and how we see technology and how we see the merging of ourselves with technology, and what are the polarities and what are the distinctions. And just 4 key questions that I think everyone should consider is, just because we can doesn't mean we should. What will our world look like? What do we want it to look like? And that's it. That ends my presentation. There's a lot there, I know. And when you get talking about these subjects, often I have a little bit longer than 30 minutes, but hopefully that will give you an idea of what I do. If you'd like to reach out, those are my details there. The main thing is that the action needs to be taken now. And I hope that was of some help and interest to you all.
Thank you, Salema. That was too insightful on the leadership, contemporary leadership, and resilience. So with this, I just want to request all the participants participate in the live blogging and go to your chat box and do the live blogging on all our social media networks. And once again, thank you, Salema, for those insightful words of wisdom which you have given.